The night was cold, and the city lights of the alien world looked strange to the human named Daniel. He had been walking for hours, holding a small bag that carried all his things. His boots were covered with dust, and his eyes showed the tiredness of many sleepless nights. Daniel had only one goal. He needed a room, just a simple room where he could rest his head. He didn't want luxury, he didn't want attention. He only wanted a place where no one would disturb him. The alien city was busy. Tall towers stood like silver spears under the green sky. Shining lights blinked on and off, showing the names of places Daniel could not even read. Strange creatures walked on the roads, some tall with shining skin, others short with glowing eyes. They spoke in voices that sounded like whispers and echoes. Daniel kept his head low and tried not to look lost. He stopped in front of a building where a glowing board said in broken human language, "Room for rent. Conditions apply." Daniel frowned. The words "conditions apply" made him uneasy, but he had no other choice. He was running out of money, and soon he would have nowhere to stay inside. The building smelled of oil and strange spices. The walls were painted with alien patterns that moved slightly, like they were alive. He walked slowly to the counter where an old alien woman sat. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes yellow like a predator's. Yet her smile was strangely warm. "Human, you need a room?" she asked in a heavy accent. Daniel nodded. "Yes, just a room, nothing else." The woman leaned forward, her smile growing wider. "You can have a room, but there is one condition," she whispered. Daniel's heart skipped. "What kind of condition?" he asked carefully. The woman tapped her long, thin fingers on the table. "Not here, not in front. Come see the room first," she said. Daniel followed her through a long hallway. The floor was made of stone that glowed faintly with each step. He felt as if the building itself was watching him. They reached a small door at the end. The woman pushed it open. Inside was a simple room, one bed, one small table, a window looking out at the city. It was not much, but to Daniel it looked like paradise. After all, he only wanted peace. Daniel turned to her. "It's fine, I'll take it. How much?" The woman's yellow eyes shined, and she shook her head slowly. "Price is not the problem. Condition is?" she said. Daniel felt uneasy again. He remembered the sign, and now the meaning was clearer. "What condition?" he asked, trying to sound firm. The woman's voice dropped lower, almost like a secret. "My daughter lives here too," she said. Daniel blinked in surprise. "So?" he asked. "You take the room." "You take her too," she said. For a moment, Daniel thought he misheard. He looked at the bed, then back at the alien woman. Her face was serious, no sign of a joke. He felt cold sweat on his neck. "What do you mean, take her too?" he asked. The woman leaned closer, her yellow eyes unblinking. "She will stay with you in the room. She is part of the deal." Daniel's chest tightened, his mind racing. Why would a mother offer her daughter to a stranger? Was this a trick or something darker? Daniel wanted to refuse right there, but his legs felt heavy, his voice caught in his throat. Something about the woman's stare made him feel trapped. The city outside was dangerous. He had no money for better rooms, and yet, something deep inside told him this deal would change his life forever. He swallowed hard. Before he could reply, the woman turned her head toward the shadows of the hallway. "Daughter, come out," she called softly. Daniel froze. From the darkness, he heard the sound of light footsteps approaching. The air in the room grew heavy. Daniel's heart beat faster. He didn't know who or what was about to walk through that door. All he knew was that his search for a simple room had just become something far more complicated and dangerous. The shadow moved closer, and Daniel's eyes widened as he saw the outline of a young alien girl stepping into the light. Her eyes were downcast, her hands folded nervously. She looked fragile, almost scared. Daniel felt the air catch in his lungs. This was no ordinary deal. This was the start of something he could not yet understand. The alien woman smiled again, her teeth sharp but shining. "You see, human, the room is not empty. It comes with her." Daniel stood frozen, torn between fear and confusion. The search for a room had just led him into a secret he never expected. And now he realized there was no turning back. Daniel did not move. He stood in silence, staring at the young alien girl who had just stepped into the room. Her skin was pale with a soft glow, her eyes large and filled with fear. She kept her gaze low, as if she was afraid to meet his eyes. Her hands trembled slightly. Clutching the fabric of her dress, Daniel's throat felt dry. This is your daughter?" he asked in a low voice. The alien woman nodded proudly. "Yes, my daughter. She will live here with you." Daniel shook his head, confused. "I don't understand. I only wanted a room." "Not," the woman raised her hand sharply to silence him. "You will understand soon, human," she said firmly. Daniel's mind was racing. He wanted to ask 100 questions. Why was this girl part of the deal? Why was she so frightened? And most of all, why did her own mother insist on something so strange? The girl finally lifted her eyes, only for a second. Daniel caught the look. There was sadness, fear, and something else hidden deep inside. It was not the look of someone who wanted to be here. It was the look of someone trapped. Daniel took a slow step forward. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Lyra." Her voice was soft, almost broken. The sound of it made Daniel's chest ache. The mother smiled, showing her sharp teeth. "You see? She will stay with you. She will serve you. She will take care of your needs." Daniel froze. The way she said those words, it didn't sound like kindness. It sounded like ownership, like Lyra was not a daughter, but something being handed over. Daniel clenched his fists, anger rising inside him. He looked at the mother. "She's not property," he said, his voice firm. The woman narrowed her yellow eyes. "Careful, human, you need this room, do you not?" Her tone was sharp, threatening. Daniel realized she was right. He had no other place to go, no money to find a safer option. The silence grew heavy. Daniel could hear Lyra's quiet breathing, the sound of her fear filling the room. Finally, he spoke slowly. "I'll take the room, but I will not treat her like that." The woman tilted her head, her smile fading. "Then you will not last long," she said coldly. She turned and walked toward the door, her steps echoing on the glowing floor. Before leaving, she looked back. "Remember the condition, human. My daughter is yours to keep, whether you like it or not." Then she was gone, closing the door with a sharp click. The room fell silent. Only Daniel and Lyra remained. He turned toward her, trying to find the right words, but Lyra backed away, pressing herself against the wall. "Please," she whispered, "don't be cruel." Like others, her words cut through him like a blade. Daniel stepped back, raising his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. Lyra blinked, her eyes shimmering with disbelief. "No one ever says that," she whispered. Daniel felt a heaviness in his chest. It was clear that this girl had been through something terrible. Her fear was not of him, but of what life had taught her before. He wanted to ask more, but he stopped himself. If he pushed too hard, she might close herself off completely. Instead, he took a seat on the edge of the bed. "I only wanted a room," he said quietly, almost to himself. But maybe fate wanted something else. Lyra looked at him for a moment, as if trying to understand his words. Then she turned her gaze back to the floor, silent once more. The city sounds outside the window felt distant. Daniel sat in silence, his mind filled with questions. Why had the mother forced this strange condition on him? Why did Lyra look so broken, so fragile? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do now? He thought of leaving, but he knew he couldn't. The city was dangerous, money was scarce, and this room was his only shelter. Still, he couldn't ignore the weight of what had just happened. This was no ordinary rental. This was a trap. One wrapped in fear and secrets. Daniel lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling that shimmered with faint alien symbols. He could feel Lyra's eyes on him. Watching cautiously from across the room, neither of them spoke. But the silence said everything. They were strangers, forced together by a condition neither had chosen, and as Daniel closed his eyes, one thought burned in his mind. This was not the end of his search, it was only the beginning. And whatever truth lay behind this condition, it was darker than he had imagined. The silence in the room stretched long after the mother left. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees. Across from him stood the alien girl, Lyra, her head bowed, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her dress. Daniel had seen fear before in the eyes of soldiers, in the faces of refugees, in his own reflection after losing everything. But the fear in Lyra's eyes was different. It was not sudden fear, but a fear that had lived with her for years, like a shadow that never left her side. He cleared his throat softly, trying not to startle her. "Lyra," he said, his voice gentle. She flinched at the sound of her name, her eyes flicking up and then dropping back down. "I'm Daniel," he continued. I'm not here to hurt you. She gave no answer, only pressed herself tighter against the wall. The room felt smaller with every passing second. The bed, the table, the window, everything seemed to close in. Trapping them together, Daniel leaned back, raising his hand slightly. You don't have to be afraid of me, he whispered. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice trembling. You don't know what she means when she says I come with the room. Daniel's chest tightened, he had guessed, but hearing it from her lips made it heavier. What does she mean? He asked carefully. Lyra shook her head. You will find out. They always do, the words chilled him. They? He repeated, Lyra's lips pressed shut, as if she had already said too much. Daniel stood and walked toward the small window. He looked out at the city, its glowing towers, its alien traffic, the shadows that moved between the lights. So many people, yet here he was, stuck in a deal that made no sense. He felt like the walls themselves were pressing secrets into his ears. Secrets he wasn't ready to hear. Turning back, he saw Lyra still hugging the wall. She looked fragile, too fragile for this world, but in her eyes was a quiet strength, the kind that grows in someone who has survived more than she should have. Daniel spoke softly. Lyra, I don't want anything from you. I only wanted a room, a place to rest. Her eyes widened slightly, as if his words were new to her. No one ever says that, she whispered. Almost in disbelief, Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Her lips trembled. Everyone who stays here. They see me as part of the bargain. Daniel's blood boiled. So it was true. The mother had been offering her daughter again and again, not as family, not as a person, but as property. He felt sick. What about you? Don't you fight back? He asked, her eyes filled with tears. Fight back? Against her? Against them? There is no fighting here, only surviving. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to tell her she deserved more. But he stopped. This wasn't the moment. She didn't need speeches, she needed safety. He sat back down, his voice calm. Listen, I'm not like them. I won't treat you like that. Lyra's eyes searched his face, trying to see if he was lying for the first time. Her shoulders eased just a little. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between them. The night grew deeper, and the sounds of the city faded. Daniel lay on the bed, while Lyra sat on the floor near the door, as if guarding herself from him. He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. Every time he drifted, he thought of her words. Everyone who stays here, they see me as part of the bargain. In the dark, Daniel whispered to himself. This isn't just a room. This is a prison. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound, soft sobbing. He opened his eyes and turned his head. Lyra had pulled her knees to her chest, rocking slightly, tears shining on her cheeks. Daniel's heart clenched. He wanted to go to her, to tell her it would be all right, but he stayed where he was, afraid that any move might scare her more. Still, his voice reached her, low and steady. You're not alone anymore, he said. Her sobbing slowed, her body stilled. She didn't reply, but for a moment, she looked at him through the dim light. It wasn't trust yet, but it was hope, and Daniel knew hope was the first step toward freedom. The night passed slowly. Daniel lay awake, his mind racing, Lyra's presence, her mother's strange condition, the heavy silence of the room. All of it pressed down on him. But one thing became clear. This was no simple rental. This was the start of something far bigger, something dangerous, and maybe something he couldn't walk away from anymore. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. Daniel lay on the bed, staring at the strange symbols glowing faintly on the ceiling. Each mark seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, and in that silence, he could hear every little sound, his own breathing, the faint hum of the city outside, and something else. It was soft, broken, like a secret that did not want to be heard. A whisper, a sob carried through the darkness. Daniel turned his head slowly. There in the far corner near the door sat Lyra, her knees pulled tightly to her chest, her face buried in her arms, her body shaking. She thought he was asleep, but her muffled cries gave her away. Daniel's chest tightened. He had heard cries like that before, cries of people who carried pain too heavy for words. He pushed himself up slowly, careful not to scare her. Lyra, he said softly. She froze, lifting her head just a little, her wide eyes shimmering in the dim light. I'm sorry, she whispered, wiping at her tears quickly. I didn't mean to wake you. Daniel shook his head, his voice calm. You don't have to apologize for crying. His words seemed to confuse her. Her lips parted, but no sound came, as if no one had ever said that to her before. He leaned forward on the bed, keeping his distance. "What's wrong?" he asked, her hands gripped tighter around her legs. "It doesn't matter. It never matters," she said, her voice breaking. Daniel could hear the weight in her words, a pain buried deep. A pain that had been ignored too many times. But she was still young, too young to carry that much sorrow alone. He spoke again, quietly. "It matters to me." The silence that followed was heavy. Lyra stared at him as if searching for a trick, waiting for the cruelty that always came with kind words. When she didn't find it, her body loosened just a little, and a whisper escaped her lips. "She said you would be like the others." Daniel's brows furrowed. "The others?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Men who came before you. They all stayed here. They all accepted the condition." Her breath hitched, tears spilling again. "They didn't care who I was, only what I was forced to be." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, anger burning in his chest. The picture was clear now. This was not the first time her mother had done this. Lyra had been trapped, treated like a piece of furniture that came with the room, and no one had ever stopped it. His voice grew firm, though still gentle. "I am not them," he said. "I didn't come here for you, and I will never treat you like that." "Lyra," she blinked, her tears pausing. Her eyes searched his face, desperate, afraid to believe. You mean it?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "I promise." Her breath trembled as if she wanted to believe but didn't know how. For a moment she allowed herself to hope. And in that hope her whispers grew stronger, more honest. "I want to leave this place," she confessed. Her voice was so small, so fragile, yet it carried a desperate truth. "I don't want to live like this anymore." Daniel felt the weight of her words sink into him. Leave? The thought had not crossed his mind until now. But looking at her, broken yet still brave enough to whisper her wish, he knew this wasn't just about a room anymore. This was about saving her. "You will," he said firmly. "One day, you will." The words hung in the air like a vow. Lyra's lips trembled, and for the first time, she allowed herself to smile, though it was faint and filled with tears. It was a smile of someone who had never been promised anything before, but the moment didn't last long. A sharp sound echoed in the hallway, a metallic click like a lock being turned. Lyra's smile vanished instantly, her body stiffening. "She's checking," she whispered in fear. "She always checks at night." Daniel's blood ran cold. The mother was making sure her condition was being followed. He moved quickly, lying back on the bed. Pretending to be asleep, Lyra curled into the corner. Wiping at her face desperately, hiding her tears, the door creaked open, and the alien woman's shadow fell into the room. Her yellow eyes scanned the bed, then slid toward her daughter. For a long moment she said nothing, only watching. Finally, she gave a low hiss and closed the door again, the sound of the lock clicking behind her. Daniel exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. But when he looked at Lyra, he saw the fear still frozen in her eyes. That night, he realized just how deep the cage around her truly was. It wasn't just the walls or the room. It was her own mother, her own blood. And Daniel knew then that if he stayed, if he dared to care, he would be fighting something far darker than he had imagined. Still, as he watched Lyra curl into herself, her silent sobs returning, he whispered one more time into the darkness, "You are not alone anymore." And in that moment, though the night was heavy with whispers, Daniel knew his search for a simple room was over. What he had found instead was a battle for a girl who had never known freedom. The morning light spilled weakly through the window, painting the room in pale green shades. Daniel sat awake long before the sun rose, his thoughts heavy and restless. He had not slept, not really. Every creak of the hallway, every faint whisper from Lyra in the night had kept him alert. When Lyra finally stirred, her movements were small, careful, as if she expected punishment for even breathing too loud. Daniel watched her quietly, not wanting to frighten her. She rubbed her eyes and pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her face looked even more fragile in the daylight. "Morning," Daniel said softly. Breaking the silence, she glanced at him, startled, then gave a tiny nod. He tried a small smile. "Did you sleep at all?" Her eyes lowered again. "Sleep doesn't help when nightmares follow you," she whispered. The words cut deeper than she knew. Daniel wanted to ask about those nightmares, but he stopped himself. He had learned enough to know that pressing too hard would only close her up again. Instead, he stood and walked to the window. Pulling the curtain aside, the city outside was alive. Flying machines buzzing. Vendors shouting in alien tongues. Lights flashing from towers. Life was moving on, free and fast. But inside this room, freedom did not exist. "Lyra," Daniel said gently, turning back to her. "You said last night you want to leave this place." Her body froze. Her eyes snapping up to his, fear flickered across her face, followed quickly by desperation. "You can't say that out loud," she whispered sharply. "If she hears—" Daniel lowered his voice, steady but firm. "She already controls too much, doesn't she? You deserve to be free." Lyra hugged her knees, rocking slightly. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You don't understand. She doesn't just control me, she owns me." The word struck Daniel like a blow. "Owns you? She's your mother," he said, confusion and anger mixing in his voice. Lyra shook her head slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "No, not like a mother should be. She calls me her blood, but to her, I'm just part of her trade. She rents me out with the room, over and over to strangers, and if they don't want me, she makes them want me." Daniel felt his stomach twist. Now the truth was clear. The strange condition was no condition at all. It was slavery, a cruel system hidden inside the walls of this simple rental. Lyra was not a daughter in her mother's eyes, but an object. "How long has this been happening?" he asked, his voice low with rage. Lyra's eyes glazed with pain. "Since I was old enough to be noticed," she whispered. "I stopped counting the faces long ago. Some stayed for a night, some for weeks. None of them cared if I cried. None of them listened. To them, I was part of the furniture, something that came with the deal." Her words shattered something inside Daniel. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Every instinct in him screamed to storm out and confront the mother, to end this nightmare right now. But one look at Lyra's shaking frame reminded him. Reckless anger would only make things worse. He took a slow breath, forcing calm into his voice. "You're not furniture, you're not property. Lyra, you are a person, and I swear I will never let anyone treat you like that again." Her eyes searched his face. Desperate, frightened. "You can't stop her," she whispered. "She owns everything, this building, this block. Even the guards outside answer to her. No one defies her if you try. She'll destroy you too." Daniel stepped closer, but not too close. His voice was steady,
carrying a weight Lyra had never heard before.
"Then let her try. I've lost everything once before. I have nothing left to fear, but you deserve a life. And if I can give you even a piece of it, I will." Lyra's breath caught, a tear sliding down her cheek. For a long time she said nothing, only stared at him as if trying to decide if he was real. Finally, in a trembling whisper, she said, "Why? Why would you care? You don't even know me." Daniel lowered his eyes, remembering the faces of people he couldn't save in the past. "Because I've seen what happens when no one cares. And I won't let that happen again, not to you." The room fell silent. But it was a different silence now, not heavy with despair, but filled with something new, hope. Fragile and small but alive. Then suddenly, the door rattled. Lyra jumped, fear rushing back into her eyes. The lock turned, and the alien woman stepped in, her sharp yellow gaze moving between them. She sniffed the air, her lips curling into a half-smile. "Good," she hissed. "You are settling in." Daniel's body tensed. His anger barely held back, but he forced himself to stay calm, his face unreadable. The woman's eyes lingered on Lyra, sharp and cruel. "Remember the condition? Human," she said softly, almost like a warning. Then she left, the sound of the lock clicking once again. Lyra's shoulders sagged in relief, but her eyes still shined with fear. Daniel's jaw tightened. Now he knew the truth, and there was no going back. This was no longer about finding a place to stay. This was about breaking chains. And as he looked at Lyra, fragile but unbroken, he made a silent vow. Whatever it cost him, whatever danger it brought, he would fight for her freedom. Because sometimes the hidden truth is not just a secret. It's a call to action, and Daniel was ready to answer. The next days passed slowly, each one heavy with tension. Daniel stayed in the room, silent, watchful, careful not to show his anger too soon, but inside, his patience was burning away like paper in fire. Every night he heard Lyra's quiet sobs. Every morning he saw her pale face and the way she flinched at the smallest sound. And every time the mother visited, Daniel felt his blood boil hotter. The alien woman came often, always unannounced. She would open the door without warning, her yellow eyes scanning the room, Her gaze was sharp, cruel, lingering on her daughter as if daring her to resist. Then she would smile at Daniel, a smile filled with mockery. "You remember the condition, don't you, human?" she would say. Her voice slithered like poison. Daniel never answered more than he had to. "Yes, I remember," he would reply flatly. Inside, his heart screamed to break her hold. But he knew one wrong move could bring danger faster than he was ready for. One evening, as the twin moons rose high over the city, Lyra finally broke her silence. They were sitting in the dim light of the room, Daniel sharpening a small pocket tool he carried. Lyra's voice trembled. "Why do you stay?" Daniel looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" She hugged her knees tighter. "You could leave, you could walk away, but you're still here with me." "In this prison?" Daniel stared at her, his jaw tight. "I stay because leaving you here would be worse than any prison I could face." Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears. "No one has ever said that," she whispered. Daniel gave a small, sad smile. "Then it's about time someone did." The room grew quiet, but the air between them was different. For the first time, Lyra did not sit in the farthest corner. She stayed closer, her fear still there but softened. Daniel could see it, the faintest spark of trust. But trust was dangerous in this house, and danger was about to arrive that night. The door burst open harder than usual. The alien woman stormed inside, her sharp claws scraping the doorframe. Her yellow eyes glowed with suspicion. "What are you doing?" she hissed, looking from Daniel to Lyra. Daniel stood quickly, hiding his anger behind a calm mask. "Talking," he said simply. The woman sneered. "Talking or plotting?" She stepped closer to Lyra, who shrank back against the wall. "You think you can escape me?" The mother spat, her voice like venom. Lyra shook her head quickly. No, I wasn't." "Silence," the woman barked, her hand rising as if to strike. Daniel's body moved before his mind could catch up. He stepped between them, his arm raised like a shield. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice shaking with restrained fury. The woman froze, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Careful, human," she whispered, her tone sharp as a blade. "You forget your place." Daniel's fists clenched, his voice low. "And you forget yours. She's not your property." The room went still. The silent, sharp Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with fear at his boldness. The mother's smile twisted into something dark. "You think you can protect her? You? You are nothing but a wanderer, a man with no home. One word from me, and the guards outside will drag you into the street." Daniel's heart pounded, but he didn't step back. For too long he had watched Lyra suffer in silence. For too long he had bitten his tongue. Now at last his breaking point had come. He leaned closer, his eyes hard. "Then let them come. I've faced worse than your guards, but I will not stand here and watch you hurt her." The alien woman's smile faded into a hiss of anger. Her claws scraped the table, leaving deep marks. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice dripping with rage. She turned sharply and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The lock clicked, but this time it sounded less like control and more like a warning. She would be back, and next time she would not come alone. Daniel exhaled, the fire in his chest still burning. When he turned, Lyra was staring at him with wide, trembling eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, her voice full of fear. "She'll destroy you now. She always destroys anyone who resists." Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. "Maybe, but I won't let her destroy you." Lyra's breath caught, her tears spilling freely. "You don't know what you've started," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Maybe I don't, but I know this. She doesn't own you anymore." Lyra stared at him, torn between fear and something new, hope. Fragile but bright. For the first time, she didn't shrink back. Instead, she whispered, "If you really mean that, then you've already changed everything." Daniel looked at her, his resolve stronger than ever. He had reached the breaking point. There was no going back now. The fight was no longer about survival. It was about freedom. And as the night deepened, both of them knew the storm was coming, and it would either destroy them or set them free. The night was heavy, the air thick with silence. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the locked door. He could almost feel the alien woman's rage pressing through the walls, waiting, planning. He knew she would not forgive his defiance, and he knew the next time she came, she would not come alone. Lyra sat close to the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes were full of fear. But there was also something new, a spark that hadn't been there before, the spark of someone who dared to hope. Even when hope was dangerous, Daniel turned to her, his voice calm but steady. Listen, Lyra. We don't have much time. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. What do you mean? She whispered. He leaned closer, his words sharp with resolve. She's not going to stop. She'll try to force me out or worse, and when she does, she'll drag you back into her cage. I can't let that happen. Lyra's breath caught, her lips trembling. But you'll die if you fight her. The guards, they'll kill you without question. Daniel gave a faint smile, the kind that carried pain but also courage. I've faced worse odds before. I'm not afraid of dying. What I'm afraid of is leaving you behind. Tears welled in her eyes. No one had ever said such words to her. No one had ever chosen her over themselves. The sound came then, a loud crash from the hallway. Boots stomping, voices growling in the alien tongue. The mother had returned, and she had brought the guards. Daniel stood, his fists clenched, his body tense. Stay behind me, he told Lyra. The door burst open, splinters flying as the alien woman stepped in. Behind her stood 2 tall guards with armored skin and glowing weapons. Her yellow eyes burned with triumph. I warned you, human, she hissed. Now you'll learn your place. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. No, you'll learn yours. The guards moved first, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed the small pocket tool from his belt. Not a weapon, but enough to strike. He dodged the first guard's swing and slammed the tool into the soft joint of its arm. The guard roared, stumbling back. The second guard lunged, but Daniel twisted aside, grabbing its weapon and slamming it into the wall. Sparks burst, lighting up the room for a moment. Chaos filled the air. Shouts, growls. The crash of bodies against furniture. Lyra pressed against the wall, trembling, her hands over her mouth. She had seen many men before, but never one who fought for her. Never one who risked everything, not for power, not for pleasure, but for her. The mother shrieked in fury. You think you can take her from me? She is mine. Daniel's voice thundered back. She was never yours. With a final shove, he knocked one guard to the floor. Unconscious, the second staggered, retreating toward the door. Daniel stood tall, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with fire. The alien woman hissed, her sharp claws twitching. She lunged at Lyra, but Daniel blocked her path. His voice was steady. Final. This ends tonight. I may not have money or power, but I have something you'll never have. The choice to care. He turned to Lyra, his hand reaching out. Come with me, he said, his voice softer now. Not as a condition, not as property, but because you want to. For a long heartbeat, the world froze. Lyra stared at him, her eyes full of tears, her body trembling. Then slowly she stood, her hands reaching for his. I'll come, she whispered, not because I must, but because you're the first who ever gave me a choice. The mother screamed in rage, but the guards, beaten and shamed, dragged her back. Her voice echoed through the hall. You can't protect her forever, human. She belongs to me. But Daniel held Lyra close, his eyes never leaving hers. No, he said quietly. She belongs to herself. They walked out of the building together. For the first time, Lyra stepped into the night not as property, not as a prisoner, but as someone free. The city lights glowed around them. The streets whispered with danger, but also with promise. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. Whatever comes, we face it together, he said. Lyra's tears fell, but this time they were not of fear. They were of hope. And as they disappeared into the vast alien city, one truth remained clear. Daniel had only wanted a room, but what he found instead was something greater. A bond, a purpose, and a choice that would change both their lives forever.